Hello and welcome to Virtual First Friday, brought to you by Arts Missoula and MCAT. This month, there is so much going on in the Missoula art world, both in person and virtually. At any point this month, if you're able, I would very much encourage you to get out there and visit some of your favorite art spots. All of these organizations have been working diligently to make sure their COVID policies are keeping everyone safe and enjoying art at the same time. Right now, there's a few places open for in-person shows for First Friday. The Artist Shop, Gallery 709 in Missoula Art and Framing. The Clay Studio is opening their show Currents, and the ZAC is opening fall favorite, the Missoula Monster Project, brought to you in partnership with MCPS and Spark Arts. Thank you so much for being here for Virtual First Friday, and enjoy the show.
Judy, would you talk a little bit about the materials you use?
Yes, there are many materials that come into my hands as a traditional basket maker. I've worked with naturally harvested cedar, spruce root, birch bark, willow, And I always seem to come back to pine needle because I love the fragrance of the forest, and they do represent our state as a state tree. I grow my own sweetgrass. I work with sweetgrass and beargrass. I can harvest right off of my mountain with care, of course, and respect for the chief of that plant. I can harvest cattail leaves. I use those, and I have Siberian iris that I grow of my own and that I add as accents. And because I've studied with native weavers, I've developed quite an interest in the value of totems. So I study the value of totems, and those are sometimes introduced to my basket designs. They always have a story, and each one is rolled and tied with ribbon and tucked in with the basket. My traditional signature has been a crate that accompanies each basket. So when you make your selection, you take it home in its own pine crate.
Share the fear and trust that peace will come, and let loose a pretty world. Sit with me for a while, share some time to see it through. There's a pool on me waiting in the western sky, coming hard to rescue you.
This is Barbara Johns. I'm an art historian, author, and former museum curator. My work for the past 15 years has focused on Issei, or immigrant generation Japanese American artists. Takeuchi Fujii was among several Issei artists in Seattle who were well known before World War II and recognized for their American realist style of painting. With the coming of war, Fujii and his family, along with 120,000 people of Japanese descent on the West Coast, were forcibly removed from their home and confined in incarceration camps. First at the Puyallup Temporary Detention Site south of Seattle, and then at the Minidoka War Relocation Authority camp in southern Idaho. He left a unique record of his experience, particularly as an Issei perspective. My introduction to Fujii's trove of wartime artwork was wonderfully serendipitous. Although I knew his paintings of the 1930s, there was virtually no record of his activity or whereabouts after 1941, other than the fact of his wartime incarceration. I was beginning a study, a dissertation, about the Issei artist's work in the 1930s, thinking I would have only tidbits of information about Fujii, when out of the blue, I was introduced online to his grandson and heir, Sandy Kita. Sandy, a scholar of Japanese art, was completing the translation of his grandfather's diary. Sandy and his wife, Terry, live on the East Coast and I on the West, but I had research to do in Washington, D.C., near their home. When we met, they showed me Fujii's wartime diary, some 150 watercolors, drawings, oil paintings, and wood carvings from the war years, and later work extending to the end of the artist's life. None of it had been seen outside the family. Fujii was born in Hiroshima, Japan in 1891. Within days of his 15th birthday, he boarded a ship for Seattle, where he was to meet his father and an older brother. His father and brother returned to Japan, but Fujii stayed and worked his way to become a fish merchant. He married and became the father of 2 daughters. He also became an artist, although there was no record of how or when. But by 1930, his paintings began to receive artistic recognition. Here are 2 paintings from the 1930s. One, a small landscape in Seattle's Nihonmachi, with the steeple of Our Lady of Good Help in the distance. The other, a landscape picturing the Rock Island Dam in central Washington shortly after its completion. The dam was the first one constructed on the Columbia River, a major public works project in the middle of the Great Depression. And here is a lovely portrait of one of his daughters as a high school student. With the onset of war and orders for the mass exclusion of ethnic Japanese from the West Coast, Fuji and his family were sent to the so-called Puyallup Assembly Center on the Washington State Fairgrounds, 30 miles south of Seattle. At Puyallup, Fuji began an illustrated diary, what the distinguished historian Roger Daniels has called the most remarkable document created by a Japanese-American prisoner during the wartime incarceration. The diary is a small single volume, 384 pages of text and image that extend from the family's forced removal to the closing of Minidoka 3.5 years later. Recently, a generous donor purchased the diary on behalf of the Wing Luke Museum, assuring that it will be held in public trust. The texts are sometimes a brief label, others are longer, some in anguish, some in wry understatement. This entry recalls the family's last night in Seattle. It's one of the longest and the only one he titled. It reads, "An evening of reluctance. Finally, tomorrow, we must say farewell to this house in which we have become so accustomed. Naked, having disposed of our shop, furniture, everything, in a muddle we packed only the absolute minimum of personal belongings, clothing, and bedding. Our home, which is now empty, feels lonely and cold in the dim light. Since we had no bed, we got out our coats and, making a temporary bed, slept together like sardines in a can. But because we couldn't sleep, we were up before dawn. Having taken our last breakfast, we waited for the time to pass. All my family looked anxious." He pictures their arrival at Puyallup and the family's move into their single-room barrack. On the very next page, he looks out the barrack's one window. He describes the fence, the machine gun, and the soldiers, and mourns, when war comes, do people become horrible like this? Thinking about that, I felt wretched. Although none of the diary's entries is dated, the sequence and repetition of images reveal the impact of events and conditions. The first pages of Puyallup show in quick sequence the dirty, dirty shower, the communal latrine, and the long lines. Time and again, he pictures the means of confinement, the fence, the guard towers, and the soldiers. He specifies his viewpoint as if giving testimony. One reads, for example, "In the north, looking in the direction of the front gate from the back." It's interesting to compare his scenes of Puyallup with those of his Seattle colleague, Kenjiro Nomura. In this colorful composition, Nomura pictures young people socializing by the gate. Fuji's, by contrast, is much starker. While part of the difference may be in the artist's disposition, Fuji's drawing is among the first ones he made at Puyallup when the shock of incarceration was most severe. Nomura's view is later, when the Nikkei have begun to adapt to the new conditions in which they must live. Fuji pictures a tremendous range of daily activities, and in the sequence of images subtly compares the activities and manner of the different generations. He pictures the departure from Puyallup, his first glimpse of Minidoka as he peers over the bus driver's shoulder, and the family moving into their barrack at night. After posting his nameplate outside the door, he steps back to look and remarks, "Indeed, this is an odd door. The lock is on the outside. I see that this relocation center is a prison." Here, as in other examples, the text and image clarify and intensify one another. We need both to fully grasp the meaning. The diary continues with a type in it of sights and activities he pictured at Puyallup, and toward the end are doubled, 2 to a page. Fuji was among those who stayed at Minidoka until the bitter end, fearful of what lay ahead after having lost nearly everything. The last 10 pages of the diary have no text, but are eloquent testimony to the acute anxiety of those who remain. In the upper right, the calendar on the wall reads October 2nd, the day that Fuji and his wife left Minidoka. Fuji produced dozens of watercolors related to the diary, as in these of Puyallup. Sometimes there's more than one version, and in the repetition we can imagine the weight that the subject must have carried for Fuji. This diary page and 3 watercolors show the same boundary sign bearing orders from General John DeWitt, the commanding officer of the Western Defense Zone. The painting at center top, although very small, is the only one among all his wartime work where Fuji signed his name. Elsewhere, he pictures the house in the background, alone. It was the view from his barrack window and represents a potent symbol of freedom on the other side of the fence. These are among many paintings of Minidoka, some related to the diary, and others are new compositions. Here, the comparable diary images again specify the location and assert his presence and witness. He tells us this is the barbed wire around Block 24, and on the right, Block 19, seen from the place where I live. His choices of buildings and infrastructure are usually those weighted with meaning, such as the headquarters of the Army Military Police above. Here also is a sandstorm that he tells us darkens the day, and a lively inverted self-portrait which puts us as viewers in his place as witness. Some contain a distinct narrative character. These postcard-sized paintings show pounding mochi for the first New Year's celebration, and on the right, Fuji and his wife surprised by a rattlesnake. The diary tells us he was bitten and hospitalized. He began to experiment with a wide range of abstract styles. Here is the fence, again, the one around Block 24, in a montage of camp objects and landmarks. 44 of the largest watercolors were stored in this handmade portfolio. On the cover, he has taped a small drawing of Seattle, the city that had been his home, and for him, had gone up in flames. None of the watercolor work is dated, and it's not clear that all of the watercolors were painted during the war. Some may have been painted in later years as he reflected on his experience. Look carefully at the painting on the right, and you'll see the portfolio on his desk, along with a wastebasket of discarded work. And here, in the only such instances, he has signed his work with a rice bowl, a stamp of his Japanese heritage. Fuji was widely known as one of the camp's artists. If you're familiar with the Minidoka interlude, you've already seen some of his work, for he was its illustrator. On the left end page is Minidoka, and on the right, Puyallup. Here again is the sign bearing DeWitt's orders. After leaving Minidoka, Fuji and his wife moved briefly to Ogden, Utah, where their older daughter and her husband were working, and by the late 1940s, they moved to Chicago, where once again the entire family was reunited. It soon included 2 grandsons. Note the little boy in the cowboy hat. Fuji continued to paint in both abstract and realist styles. In the last years of his life, he produced a series of large, bold, black and white abstractions. He died in 1964. 3 generations of his family have carefully stored his artwork: his widow, his daughter, and his grandson. I've had the exceptionally rewarding opportunity to bring Fuji's accomplishment to public attention for the first time in my book published in 2017, and in this exhibition that is touring nationally until 2025. Here is Fuji's grandson, Sandy Kita, That Little Boy in the Cowboy Hat, at the opening of the exhibition at the Washington State History Museum. I'm deeply pleased that the exhibition appears now at the Missoula Art Museum, for nearby Fort Missoula shares an important role in the history of Japanese-American wartime incarceration. The exhibition introduces an artist whose work has been nearly unknown, but which contributes significantly to a more complicated, expansive, and inclusive view of American art and experience. I invite you to look and reflect. Thank you.
A Walk by Rainer Maria Rilke, translated by Robert Bly. My eyes already touch the sunny hill, going far ahead of the road I have begun. So we are grasped by what we cannot grasp. It has its inner light, even from a distance, and changes us, even if we do not reach it, into something else, which, hardly sensing it, we already are. A gesture waves us on, answering our own wave, but what we feel is the wind in our faces.
Here we are. So, we are at the Dana Gallery, and we have some paintings here by a new artist, Scott Switzer, Fran's father. But we have made a big decision here. We have decided that possibly, since we haven't sold a painting in quite a while, quite a few months, probably, I don't know, we have decided to diversify. And I think you all can probably understand why. We have discovered this commodity here, which serves two purposes. It's modern art, and it's toilet paper. I gotta get a drink of this because this is keeping me alive. Whoa! Now, there's been some rumors going around town all the time that we have sold this art gallery, and those rumors may or may not be true. However, they are not true. It is true that we still own this gallery, and we're going to hang on to it and all these great people we got here as long as I live, which could be, you know, a week, or it could be more than that. Let's see.
Okay. This is artist Kevin Redstar out of Roberts, Montana, our very own. He is one of the leading 5 Native American painters in the country right now, internationally recognized for his crow portraiture and his Native American teepees. He also won the Governor's Choice Award for Montana back in 2018, which is really amazing. He also is nationally known, and Sotheby's, based out of New York, had him come into a flat a couple years ago and actually paint the New York City skyline for them.
I'm going to show you this Robert Moore here. So Robert was my favorite artist for years and years and years. I just can't say enough about him. This is a bit of a departure for him. And he was also a winner of the Idaho Governor's Award for Visual Arts.
This is a great new piece by artist Garth Williams, from Idaho. And thanks to Robert Moore. Robert is such a great guy, and besides celebrated artist, he is a magnificent mentor. And when Garth retired, he told me, he's like, I'm moving into Robert's studio. I always wanted to paint. And it's extraordinary to see how well he's achieved that.
All right, it's one of my favorites, are David Wilson, local Missoula artist. He taught Spanish for quite a few years, but has always painted, and has won numerous awards, humanitarian awards and whatnot. So anyway, I love his work. That's all I have.
I just want you to know how much everybody's been pitching in here. For example, we have one of our best staff members just pitched in and started doing a job that nobody else would do. Oh, I got caught again. Oh, I got caught again. I've gotten so attached to this. It makes me happy too, besides killing germs. Okay, but I could give you guys a demonstration while I do this. You just go round and around and around, and it's been kind of plugged up lately. For example, the other day, I unplugged it and there was that shoe, and then, oh my God, what is this thing? My God. Oh, it's some kind of a thing you wear on your hat, isn't it? Huh? It's dripping though, and it's probably not very clean water. Now I'll have to use Lysol again, so you guys can, but anyway, thanks for showing me.
I love this piece by Parveen, artist Parveen. She's been part of the gallery for almost since the beginning, 20 years or so, and she is magnificent. She has such a gift. She'll walk into the studio never quite knowing what's going to happen, and allow the paint to take her where it wants to go. And every time she's amazed by what happens. She's an incredible individual. She's had multiple careers over lifetime. She's even a pilot and a diver. Incredible woman. We love her.
In the first place, if you buy more than $50,000 worth of art, you get 1/2 of 1% off. I don't want to forget to mention that. But then we have our young art collectors. Anybody 35 or under can take any painting home. They have to pay nothing down, and they have over a year to pay for it, which is pretty darn good. Okay, this is painted by Scott Switzer, who is originally from Billings. Studied art with Robert Moore, actually, at the Pasadena Art Center, which at the time, at least, was the top teaching facility in the country. And then Scott and Robert have been friends forever. And Scott's lived almost everywhere, now living in Sandpoint, Idaho.
Diane Ainsworth. She is an artist from New Mexico, Taos, New Mexico. A real sweet woman. I love her. I love talking with her. And her work is just brilliant, like the texture. And just love her. She does a lot of bar scenes, and hopefully, we were just talking, we will all be here soon. We're waiting for that moment. But anyway, just wanted to share that with you.
Here we have young artist Caleb Meyer, a Missoula local here, and he is one of our youngest painters, professional painters here in the gallery. A couple years ago, he won the 21 under 31 artists feature in Southwest Art, which is pretty amazing. There's a lot of fabulous artists that they featured in there. Also, Caleb he studied under Robert Moore down in Idaho for some time. So you can really see Robert's influence as far as the application of paint goes on here. But Caleb has really taken his own eye and just is running with it.
Reed Christie is a really, really well-known artist from Cody, Wyoming. In fact, his work is featured in the Buffalo Bill Historical Museum. Anyway, I don't have a lot to say about him except I've been begging him for years, and thanks to Liz, we finally are getting a substantial number of his paintings.
This is a gorgeous, misty winter scene by artist Lori McNee. She's from Idaho. We have a wonderful family artist from Idaho. And I think she came to the gallery shortly after we hosted the first National Oil Painters America show here, right here in Missoula, Montana. It was great. She is revered as a blogger. She does workshops and she has a book out. We really are quite pleased to have her in here. And this piece in particular won an award for the National Impressionist Society during a particular show a few years ago. So we love having her on board.
This is Robert Schlegel from Banks, Oregon. Another painter who's been with us like most of these for 16, 17 years. This is typical of what Robert does, although he does a number of things, including hurting my feelings, because he comes for our annual paint out, which will be 18 this year. And I go up and I say, "Hey Bob, how you doing?" He says, "Pretty good, where's Candace?" And that's what I say, "Where's Candace? She's not here today doing this."
We miss Missoula!
Check out our website.
Check out our website, and we may do a quick run here of our basement so you can see what we have in our basement, which is a treasure.
Next time you visit the Dana Gallery, come visit the Treasure Trove, our second level down here in the basement.
I'm here in Gallery 709, reviewing the Patty Canyon Ladies Salon exhibition. These works by Sherry Montana are featured among other artists in the Patty Canyon Ladies Salon, like Christy Hager, pottery by Janet Whaley, paintings by Nancy Erickson, paintings by Linda Tawney and Becky Johnson. Some of the works are different than what we had first Friday in September, since we sold some things. Newly featured are the remaining 5 paintings from the Mount Jumbo series by Stephanie Frostad. Come out to the gallery first Friday, October 2nd, to view these works. We'll have the door open and plenty of outdoor seating. Wear a jacket and a mask. It should be good.
I first began drawing from the model in college, and we had to draw in pen and ink on bond paper, so there was no erasing, and it was quite rigorous, but I liked it. And I continue to like it because to me it's kind of like doing simultaneous translation. You really have to stay in the moment, and you're translating a three-dimensional living person in front of you onto a two-dimensional piece of paper in a limited period of time. So for me, it's best to just keep my hand moving and not think too much. I like a lot of things about being in the group, but one thing is that when we are all drawing together and simultaneously translating the model, we are all speaking very different visual languages. And it's always interesting to see what we come up with.
I'm here at Gallery 709 in Montana Art and Framing with Stephanie Frosted. We're at the Patty Canyon Lady Salon show, and I'm going to have a few questions for Stephanie. When did you first start drawing the figure from life?
I took my first life drawing class at Whitman College when I was 17, and it was one of the most exhilarating experiences of my life up to that point. Of course, I'd been drawing people before then, but it was an entirely different experience to be in the studio with a live model and in a group of adults also. So that was when I kind of got started on life drawing.
What do you value about the life drawing?
Well, I work with the human figure throughout my art and in my paintings, and so it seems like any degree of study I do from life helps inform what happens in those paintings. But I also think that there's something about human proportion and the opportunity to empathize with one's subject that makes life drawing really important to all kinds of artistic endeavor.
Well, you practice this at the Patty Canyon Ladies Salon. What do you really appreciate about that group?
Well, it's a wonderful group of women, and so simply being in their company is a delight. But I would also say this, a lot of artistic practice is solitary, and it's great to have some camaraderie around artistic endeavor, a chance to actually work side by side, but also to have events like this that allow us to bring our work out to the world as a group.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. We'll see you first Friday, October 2nd.